Greetings! Hey, it's me, Doug, posting my once every 5 months video as a reminder that I am not dead, but I am in fact undead, so I can keep posting more content for you guys. So I'm going to try to keep this video as short as the average Innistradian lifespan and dive right into it, since hopefully you guys get the gist of what the series is about by now. And if not, you should just check out some of my other videos for context. So let's dive right into it. Another entry in my small series covering some of the color alignment based flavor of the major kindred on the plane of Innistrad, and how these color alignments are used to weave subtle stories or narrative into their respective creature types. Sorry for the stumbling. I'm trying to go away from using the term tribes for the creature types in Magic, so if I stumble a lot in this video, that's part of the reason why. In the last entry of the series, I took a small detour and talked about angels, which you can watch here or read on my Tumblr. But this time, I'll finally talk about spirits as promised. Firstly, let's go over their color identity. Similar to humans, spirits, or as they are more commonly referred to on Innistrad, Geists, appear in all colors, but they still have two main colors in which a majority of the ones we see on Innistrad are aligned with. In the case of humans, those colors are green and white. In the case of Geists, they are white and blue. As always, we must look at why spirits on Innistrad tend to lean towards white and blue. Well, we know that on this plane, white-aligned spirits tend to be more likely to be a sort of guardian spirit, and blue-aligned spirits tend to be more likely to be more like the garden variety spooky kind of ghosts. White is a color that's gotten a lot of spirits over the years. The first most obvious connection between spirits and white is through religion. White is a color that's very likely to have a turn towards religion and religious institutions, and there tends to be a lot of religions that believe in some sort of afterlife or that we have some sort of soul. The existence of something like a soul can also tie in with the themes of objective morality that white often has. Any idea that if you do something bad, it may not affect you physically, but instead it may affect your soul or moral compass. Also, while spirits can often be associated with dead things, they can be associated with things such as life. I mean, not every spirit people talk about necessarily comes from dead things, and heck, some spirits are even worshipped. Although in Innistrad, as far as I'm aware, Geists come from people or things that have died. In looking at Innistrad's Geists, the white-aligned ones tend to be spirits that remain to protect or help people. This sort of ties in with the unfinished business type stuff a lot of Geists on Innistrad seem to have. White is all about the greater good and protecting people, and to that end, it would make sense that someone or something that died but is bound by their duty to help or protect people would stay rather than move on to blessed sleep, and they would probably be of the white alignment. We are also told in places like A Planeswalker's Guide to Innistrad that white-aligned Geists tend to haunt the living out of a sense of duty, responsibility, love, etc. Well, at least the benevolent ones do. The malevolent ones haunt the living out of guilt, feelings of failure, or unrighted wrongs. These all tie into White's dreams of a moral right and wrong. I mean, if there is a moral right or wrong, that means you can also do something wrong or fail in your duty, and that might make you feel guilty or like a failure. It also means that you can be wronged by other people and be upset about it. The Geists also have a color overlap with humans, which could possibly reference the fact that a lot of the Geists we see come from humans. And if a human does not achieve blessed sleep, they will die, and are likely to come back as a spirit. However, that's not to say that all the Geists we see came from humans or anything. Some of them come from things such as hippogriffs and the like. One of the weaknesses of white is that it can end up being very inflexible and unwilling to change, which could be interpreted as some ghosts not resting until their job is done, refusing to quit, continuously trying to carry out their duty, or something of that nature. When it comes to color philosophy, blue has always had some sort of connection to the spirits. The reason being that blue tends to think beyond just the body and its emotion, and towards things like the mind and spirit. The mind and potentially spirit is a place where knowledge tends to reside, and that's not to mention that ghosts can be pretty hard to interact with, due to their general incorporeal nature. Plus, they are also capable of all sorts of weird and spooky tricks, just flying through walls and stuff. Both of these things, I would argue, can be pretty blue. Blue is definitely one of the colors most likely to have trickster-type characters, along with black and red. Sakashima is a good example of a blue trickster, and it's a color that often likes to use things such as illusions, manipulation, and trickery to get what it wants. Heck, if you really want to take it a step further, you could argue the pop culture ability of ghosts being able to possess things could be seen as akin to something like a blue spell or enchantment that allows you to take control of a creature. Not to mention that the ability to remain intangible could mimic an ability like hexproof, ward, or can't be blocked that blue creatures can have. And just by default, ghosts float through the air, and we know blue is a color that has a lot of flyers. It's also worth mentioning that white has a decent number of flyers too, and there are white-blue cards that encourage or reward you for playing flying type creatures in Magic. Flying type was his Pokemon? Now, as far as Innistrad is concerned, as mentioned earlier, the blue-aligned Geists on Innistrad tend to be more of the standard spooky ghosts. The first thing I noticed when looking over the cards, especially the ones in Innistrad, Midnight Hunt, is a theme of unfinished business when it comes to spirits. In white, this unfinished business is usually protecting people, but in blue it tends to be other things. I think the theme of unfinished business can actually be very blue from a flavor perspective. While blue is a color of knowledge and reason, it is also the color of perfection. To be more specific, blue as a color philosophy doesn't inherently believe it is possible to be literally perfect. Rather, it believes that you should be striving to be the best you one can be, which in Magic is often summarized as perfection because you are often essentially striving to get as close to it as possible, even if you can't reach perfection itself. Where am I going with this? Well, let's look at our friend above, Bait Hook Angler, who, as we can see, is someone who died trying to get a big bite on his hook while fishing. Well, as a ghost, he's still trying to get that bite, even if he has long forgotten why he's doing it. He's essentially trying to get the perfect or best catch he can possibly get. If you want another example, let's look at Overwhelmed Archivist. Our poor friend here is being overworked, and he presumably dies before he can finish his archiving job. However, he comes back as a ghost that seems to be intent on continuing his life's work. This once again ties in with the themes of perfection, as we can see a blue line character trying to finish their goal, and by extension trying to do the best job they can. In A Planeswalker's Guide to Innistrad, one of the things we are told is that blue aligned guides are projections of the animating principles of the mind, and they tend to be very obsessive ghosts, repeating the same task over and over. If you ask me, that once again points to a theme of a sort of perfection, or trying to reach some sort of goal they failed to meet in life. This brings me to another connection that blue and spirits have, that I should probably have mentioned earlier, which is a theme that can be described as something like transcendence or improvement. As mentioned earlier, blue thinks beyond just the physical body and emotions. Not to say that all blue line characters don't care about their body. So becoming a spirit could potentially allow freedom from that. I mean, think about it. Depending on the specifics, becoming a spirit could mean you are no longer bound to a limited mortal body that can feel things like pain and possibly even strong emotions that could cloud your judgment or cause you suffering. Furthermore, being a spirit would give you more time to do things that you want and gather knowledge, and we all know blue is all in on improvement thinking in the mind. So in the end, I would say that it makes a lot of sense that for some blue line peoples or entities, that being no longer bound by a physical mortal body, but also getting a non-physical one that can do things like fly through walls while still being able to interact with the world around them, would be something that they would jump at the opportunity to take advantage of. We also know that Geists on Innistrad are capable of possession, and blue Geists are the ones most drawn to forms of water, such as storms, frost, mist, and even the moisture from one's breath. Possession ties into something I mentioned earlier about blue, often taking control of things, through manipulation or mind control. The attraction to water is based on blue's association with water and ice, which is something I went over when I covered angels, but basically it leans into some of blue's possibly cold and calculating nature, along with some associations that air and water have to the mind and spirit. I guess the philosophical color overlap for the guy stems from both white and blue wanting to improve things or the world around them, which is something they all have more time to do if they linger as Geists, and could tie into the idea of unfinished business or a goal that ties one to the mortal world for a long period of time. I guess they are also trying to right wrongs or incompletions that happen in their life. That's kind of like trying to make the world a better place, right? Even if you become a warped reflection of your former self in some cases. Now, the disturb mechanic is flavorfully strong but really simple. It is a keyword that allows you to pay mana in order to cast a keyword creature from the graveyard in their transformed state, which blatantly tells you that in order to become a spirit on Innistrad, you have to either die or already be dead. So you end up with a card that comes back as a guy/ghost from beyond the grave. Of course, when a spirit with this keyword dies, it is exiled because it's like straight up beyond dead now. Like super dead. Like Kaya Ghost Assassin killed you dead, I guess. I mean, its very soul was destroyed, sent to rest, or what have you. Doug from the future here once again. One thing I forgot to mention is that in Crimson Vow, we see guys with a disturb mechanic that are ghosts on the front side, then turn into enchantments on the other side. And this, of course, represents the, as opposed to saying die, represents the ghost being disturbed after death and then coming back as some sort of haunting or enchantment or blessing or possession or what have you. So still pretty simple, but also still flavorful in that if you fuck with or annoy the ghost, they come back, but in a different new way. It also reflects how ghosts can be pretty hard to kill because they're already dead. So you can quote unquote kill them, but then they might, come back later. There are guys that fall under all the other colors on Innistrad too. Because I'm feeling up to it, I'll quickly cover them too, starting with black. I feel like black's connection with spirits is fairly easy to understand, especially given its association with death and the undead. Black is not above desecrating things like zombies and spirits for its own ends, nor is it above becoming some sort of undead lich, evil spirit, vampire, or other horde abomination in order to gain more power. Black's power-hungry philosophy can also cause a vengeful, grudge-filled, or just plain power-hungry spirit to manifest. We are told that black aligns Gaia's eternal hunger for life, power, or the settling of a wicked grudge, and these are spirits that must be appeased by offerings of food, goods, and even blood. If not appeased, these guys can be responsible for disease, accidents, and death, which ties into Black's themes of power and control, since having to give it resources or offerings would mean that it's the one calling the shots. Also, these quotes are from Planeswalker's Guide to Innistrad on the Nephali and Undead. Or I should say Nephali, because I'm pretty sure it's a place, and then Undead. Look, there's going to be a link in the description, probably, or if not, it's also in the original article if you want to go check it. Check it out. Ultimately, Black wants to be the one in charge and in control. It is also stated that whereas guys associated with other colors of mana might be benevolent or neutral, Black-aligned guys are almost always dangerous and malevolent, which ties into Black's themes of selfishness and looking out for yourself first and foremost, even at the expense of others, and how Black will do whatever it takes to get what it wants/needs to keep power. There is also the fact that, mechanically speaking, Black is a color that really cares about the graveyard in multiple ways, and it probably tends to care about it the most out of all the colors in Magic. Red's connection to ghosts comes from the emphasis on emotions. It is a very common idea that ghosts linger around because of some sort of strong emotion or grudge, and we all know how strongly Red is all about following your emotions. So it makes sense that red-aligned guys are described as being spirits that have attached themselves to rampant emotion, unfulfilled desires, and thus revenge that were frustrating doing life. I don't know why I did the voice, but... Okay, so the blood dripping from statues is a common ghost trope, and blood can strongly be associated with emotion. Phrases like, "Oh, they make my blood boil," help get this idea across. Also, blood is usually red in color, so there is a visual connection there too. The worlds of dust and rock slides is due to Red's connection with the elements of earth and fire, which is something I touched on in my last talk. But to make it simple, both of these elements are often associated with the body-based urges and emotions. The fact that these guys can appear as living fire or as blood mists and are capable of engulfing victims in order to inflict cuts and welts that are slow to heal ties into Red's association with fire and blood mentioned for the reasons above. The effects of mania or murderous rage when possessing is simply Red's connection to emotion. Red is also a color that tends to be very good at appealing to emotion, so causing things to be filled with some sort of strong emotion as a ghost also makes sense from that angle. Although it should also be mentioned that similar to blue, Red can take control creatures which could be likened to possession. However, unlike blue, Red's control usually untaps them and gives them haste, but relinquishes control of them by the end of the turn. This is a representation of how a red mage or character may be good at appealing to emotions, but ultimately emotions tend to be fast and strong, but fleeting, and aren't very logical if the one feeling them has enough time to think clearly, which is in contrast to blue's more methodical, long-term oriented manipulation. The unavenged red guys are also described as the most dangerous guys on Innistrad, and that is something that ties into how Red can be a really volatile and in-the-moment color due to it following emotions, which can be fleeting, strong, or short-sighted. Last but not least is green. Green guys want to be reconnected with the nature they revered in life, which is something that's pretty plainly a connection to how green values nature and looks towards it for guidance. We know that some of these spirits attach themselves to things like animals and plants, which ends up imbuing the affected with special powers or turning them into otherworldly entities. This also ties into green's love of nature and desire to be connected with it. There are also green guys that attach to landforms themselves, which also imbues said landform with special powers or turns them into weird entities. And if the spirits that live within that landform are not appeased, they can create a blight, crop failure, and famine. These guys are clearly leaning towards a nature spirit vibe, which is a common trope. And the fact that they will punish those who do not treat them well or respect the land ties in with green's ideology of showing respect and reverence for the natural order and stuff. Oh, and guys are sometimes used as a power source in Innistrad, usually by mad scientists and the like. And while this doesn't say anything about them philosophically, it does add to the atmosphere and vibe of Innistrad, especially if you are a mad scientist or necro-alchemist who needs some interesting tech. Okay, that was way more than I thought I was going to write, but also the video version of this is way shorter than I thought it was going to be. So, do you have a favorite spirit in Magic the Gathering, either mechanic-wise, flavor-wise, or character-wise? Also, as always, if you find yourself dealing with a spirit problem, call Kaya Spirit Killing Services, KSKS, or KSKS for short. We make sure the dead stay dead, so you don't have to. We are located on Goldbrick Road near the Orzhov Syndicate's main guild building, and don't worry, we won't try to extort you for all your money. If you need a bit more convenience in your life, you can also always send a message via the Is It Teleportation devices. We're not responsible for any injuries caused by these devices, whether they be physical, mental, or spiritual. Thank you for your services.